The city of Tacoma, Washington passed a tenants' rights measure that would force landlords to pay relocation assistance of up to 3 months' rent if they increase their rent more than 5%. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Washington State, and specifically Tacoma, Washington, which is one of the more left leaning places within the state, okay? And that's saying a lot in a state like Washington, okay? But here's the thing, they put a tenant rights measure on the ballot and it passed. It barely passed, but it passed. And it's bad news for landlords. I feel bad for the landlords up there who are operating and now are going to have to fall under all these new rules and regulations because it's going to make it more difficult to do business. It's going to make it more expensive to do business. You're going to end up stuck with tenants that you don't want in your properties. You won't be able to raise the rents like you originally had planned to do. And overall, it's going to drive some landlords completely out of the rental business, causing there to be less affordable housing for those tenants who claim that's what they want. Okay. So why would they pass this sort of thing? Because simply put, there are more tenants than there are landlords, and they have a bigger vote. Okay. That's the truth. And they're going to vote for the thing that is the most beneficial for them right there at that moment, not thinking about, hey, what's going to happen in the future? Are we going to have trouble finding housing in the future? Is this going to drive up housing costs? Well, they don't care. They just don't care. So, like that would be like somebody coming to me right now and saying, hey, how would you like to pay $1 a gallon for gas for the rest of your life? I'd be like, heck yeah, I would like that, right? But it doesn't take into fact that, hey, it's going to, there's going to be inflation as time goes by. And if I'm only paying $1 a gallon for gas, that means that the oil companies or the refineries are going to be subsidizing me getting cheap gas. They're going to be basically paying out of their pocket for me to get cheap gas. And if the cost that I'm paying for gas doesn't pay for their expenses, well, they're just not going to produce it for me anymore. So I might suddenly find that, yeah, I only have to pay $1 a gallon for gas, but there's no gas to buy anywhere. And that's exactly what's going to happen with housing, okay? I like to use analogies sometimes because people, they get confused by what I'm trying to convey, okay? And specifically, I'm talking about the tenants here, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Are you surprised that a city in Washington state comes up with these ridiculous left-leaning anti-landlord laws? I'm not. I am not, okay? Washington State has proven itself to be one of the worst places to be a landlord, one of the worst places for property rights, and it's only getting worse. So, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's a good idea to pay tenants relocation assistance ever for any reason. Their relocation, that should be dependent upon them, not us. It isn't our job to make sure that our tenant in the future has a way to move somewhere. No. Simply put, they should be able to find a place on their own and move into it. It isn't our fault if they can't. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from the Washington State Standard, and it says, Tacoma tenants' rights measure passes with fewer than 400 votes. I think part of the big story was just how close this election came to going the other way, where this thing didn't pass, right? And my only issue being that it doesn't matter if it passes by one vote, we still lost. Okay, so anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. A Tacoma ballot measure that would provide some of the state's strongest protections for renters has passed, with supporters having just 361 more votes than those voting against it. The slim lead held by backers of initiative measure number 1 amounted to 50.4% of votes tallied, compared to opponents' 49.6%. The Pierce County Auditor's Office estimates there are only 100 ballots left to count in the county. The next vote tabulation is scheduled for 4 p.m. Thursday. And this really, this kind of thing, it shows you that, hey, everybody's vote does count, and that just by that very slim margin, we ended up in this bad situation where landlords within Tacoma are just basically going to be stuck with these new rules and regulations, okay? Under the measure, landlords would have to give 2 notices to tenants before raising rent and at least 6 months' notice of pending increases. At any time after a 180-day notice of a rent increase of 5% or more, a tenant can request relocation assistance equal up to 3 months of rent, depending on the amount of the increase. Landlords must provide relocation assistance within 30 days of receiving the request. So, yeah, landlords have to notify their tenants far in advance of any rent increases. And if they do decide to increase their rent more than 5%, well, you have to provide that tenant with up to 3 months of relocation assistance. So even if the tenant was planning on moving anyway and had the money saved up, they can somehow squeeze that relocation assistance out of the landlords. That's just completely wrong. Okay. Why don't you just face the fact that, hey, there's going to be tenants taking advantage of this law. There's going to be tenants who are looking for a free handout. If you have a monthly rent of $1,000 a month, right? So what you're saying is you have a monthly rent of $1,000 a month. The landlord has to pay you $3,000 to leave and possibly return your security deposit as well. That's stupid. Okay. So yeah, you're putting a huge financial burden on the landlords and telling them that, hey, you now are going to have to do your math to figure out the increased costs. The measure would also prohibit landlords from evicting people during cold weather or during the school year if a tenant is a student. Ty Moore, campaign manager for Tacoma for All, which supported the initiative, said in a statement on election night that if passed, the measure could spur renters' rights expansions in other parts of Washington. Many parts of the state are facing shortages of affordable housing and high rates of homelessness. Yeah, and this will not address the issue of the shortage of affordable housing at all. It won't. Okay, it's only going to cause there to be less housing. There's not going to be more housing caused by this. This isn't going to suddenly say, oh yeah, everybody's going to go out and start building affordable housing now because this measure passed. No, there's still going to be a shortage. In fact, the shortage will get worse because there's going to be less landlords who want to deal with this nonsense. Okay, then they throw in there, hey, well, we're going to put in there a winter eviction ban and then a eviction ban on households with students in them during the school year. So you're making it so that, remember, the school year lasts from like September until like freaking June. Okay, so the only time you can evict a household with a student is in what? July and August. I mean, you have a 2 month span right in there where you can evict. Okay, and then even if you don't have a kid in your household, you're protected from eviction for the winter months. I mean, they'll probably start it in October and go all the way to freaking April or May. So you got a 6 month period where nobody can be evicted, but you have a 10 month period where families with kids in them can't be evicted. So you're putting it a position, you're putting into place, you're putting landlords in a bad position, okay? A position where they cannot evict their tenants in a reasonable manner, and they may be stuck with a tenant who isn't paying rent for 8-9 months straight, okay? And then you may have to pay them relocation assistance on top of that. So what a complete farce. Yeah, I'm not in support of this sort of thing. Here's my suggestion. And I always make this suggestion every time I bring up these sort of laws, in places like Washington State. Don't invest there. If you're a small landlord in particular, you don't have to be a landlord in Washington State. Okay? Bigger landlords who have, a lot of emergency reserves, they have a plan, they have, a lot of backup, and they know the system very well. They have the best chance of making a profit there. Right? But the smaller landlords, you maybe own one house, maybe own two. Well, you're going to get taken advantage of by some tenant and you're going to absolutely hate it.